We've learned earlier that when a firm pays out cash dividends, the cash leaves the company's books and equity is reduced by the amount of cash paid out. Sometimes dividends are not paid in cash, but in the form of new shares, known as stock dividend. Don't confuse stock dividend with share repurchase. When stock dividend is paid, no cash leaves the company, so the total amount of equity remains the same. However, as there are more outstanding shares in the market, each share is now worth less. We've learnt that a stock dividend, stock split, and reverse stock split are corporate actions that do not change the shareholder's wealth or the company's balance sheet, so they have no effect on the total value of the common stock. In contrast, share repurchases can be seen as an alternative to cash dividend payments. The cash also leaves the company's balance sheet, so the effect on the balance sheet is the same as for cash dividend. The difference here is that there are outstanding shares that have been repurchased and placed in the company's treasury, so they're not considered for future dividends, voting, or computing earnings per share or book value per share. As there are now fewer number of outstanding shares, the earnings attributable to each share is increased, thus increasing the value of each share. This means that shareholder wealth is increased even though the shareholder does not receive cash. Let's make some comparisons with some hypothetical figures. Before the distribution, the company has 18 million shares outstanding, with a market price of $20 per share. Latest earnings was $18 million. Book value of equity before dividend or repurchase was $450 million. The book value per share was therefore $25 per share, and earnings per share was $1 before dividend or share repurchase. Let's say the company paid out $60 million in cash dividend. The remaining equity would be $390 million. The number of outstanding shares would still be 18 million, so the book value per share would drop to $21.67. Earnings per share would still be $1 as the number of outstanding shares remains the same. In contrast, if the company used the $60 million to repurchase the shares at their market price of $20 per share, it would have repurchased 3 million shares, so the outstanding shares will be reduced to 15 million. $60 million cash is removed from its balance sheet, so remaining equity would also be $390 million. So in this case, book value per share would increase to $26. Earnings per share would also increase to $1.20 as there are now fewer outstanding shares. Do note that while it is always the case that EPS will increase after share repurchase, it's not always the case that book value per share would increase after share repurchase. It depends on the repurchase price. Like in this case, the shares were repurchased at $20 per share, which is lower than the original $25 book value per share. Since less cash was used to purchase something of greater value, the BVPS increased. So if we reverse the argument, that is, if the shares were repurchased at a price greater than $25, the BVPS would have decreased. As a practice, let's say the company used the $60 million to repurchase its shares at $30 per share instead. Calculate the BVPS and EPS after the share repurchase. Pause the video now and work out your answer. And we're back. In this case, the company is only able to repurchase 2 million shares, so the number of outstanding shares becomes 16 million. Use this to divide the remaining equity of $390 million, we have a BVPS of $24.38. As expected, the BVPS has dropped since the company paid more than book value to repurchase the shares. Earnings per share, however, increased to $1.125. Earnings per share always increases after a share repurchase as the number of outstanding shares is reduced. So, to summarize what we've learnt, EPS always remains the same after cash dividend is paid. This is because the number of outstanding shares remains the same. In contrast, EPS always increases after share repurchase using cash as the number of outstanding shares is reduced. We emphasize using cash here as we'll learn in the next lesson that share repurchase by issuing new debt may not necessarily lead to this outcome. Book value per share always decreases after cash dividend as total equity is now lower. In contrast, BVPS can increase or decrease after a share repurchase. If the repurchase price is lower than the original BVPS, the BVPS should increase. If the repurchase price is higher than the original BVPS, the BVPS should decrease.
You're watching an excerpt from our comprehensive animation library. For more videos like these, head on down to prepnuggets.com. At Prep Nuggets, let us do the hard work for you.